Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the comic shop. In this video, it's going to be something a little different. Instead of showing you how I assemble a print, I'm going to be showing you how I use my Cura settings and how I take care of my 3D printer to actually get these kind of results. Stay tuned. Okay, so I know, when I first started 3D printing, I used to see great quality just like this on people's prints. I used to think, well, how the heck did you do that? Maybe even asking things like I was, like, what's Tinkercad? What's Thingiverse? What the heck is an STL? What's a slicer? What's Cura? What's... So I'll break it down to you, make it pretty simple. I'll be breaking down basically two things that you'll be using. And they're two things that you 100% need to actually be 3D printing. So one is the software and two is the hardware. So I'll be going over some things that I looked at in Cura and what really confused me, like what I don't actually touch or look at all, and what actually I make sure and check in each step or each print that I do, and what I'm looking at on my printer to make sure it's good for a print. As long as I know I have the software in place and the printer, the hardware, in a good setting, it's good to So as you can see, I actually have the rest of the Black Panther helmet coming out now, and you can clearly see that there's a lot of detail that's coming out. I'm not getting any layer shifts, any cracks, nothing like that's coming out with the print. It's coming out all one and solid. Why is there tape? What's going on? Let's get into it. Okay, so I know that printer's going on in the background, so bear with me as far as the noise. I'll try to speak as loud as I can. But there are three main things that you want to focus on when you're looking at your 3D printer and when you're about to print that I'll break down for you guys. So one is the extruder. It's very good to know what your extruder is, what your extruder does, and how you can tell if it's in good condition or not. The extruder is connected to the Bowden tube, and the Bowden tube is then connected into your hot end. Your hot end, this whole assembly is something that you should get very familiar with as well, because it's very important in how your prints are coming out. And then finally, the bed. So again, why do I have tape on my bed? Well, I have a glass bed. You might have a magnetic bed. What's the best bed? Can I actually switch these beds out? Yes, you can. What about these gears under? Why does mine have an orange cord? Why might yours not? So first things first, as I mentioned, is the extruder. Now the extruder has one focus. It has no CPU, it has no brain, it just has gears and motors. And what those gears and motors are set to do is take the filament from the holder and feed it into your hot end. Now, no matter what's going on with your printer, as I mentioned, this doesn't have a CPU, this doesn't have a brain. So if there's a clog, if there's a jam, if there's something going on where the extruder is having an issue, it has no fail-safe mechanism. It's not gonna know that something's going on. So just gotta keep cranking and cranking and cranking and doing its job. As I mentioned, there are, I would say, three ways that you can check on your extruder to, one, make sure it's good, or to understand if it's wearing, or to know, hey, I gotta get rid of this thing in total. So as I mentioned, they're gears. As you can see on the gold gear, there are little teeth, and then you can see like that little black dot. Now, when changing this thing, it's just gonna be a simple removing of those bolts. But the first thing that I want to look at when I'm looking at my extruder, yeah, mine's a little dusty. I'm in a closet with my printer, so there's always going to be a little dust. But what you want to look at is the gears themselves. Is there any like fragments coming off from that metal gear? Does it look weird? Does it look straight? Does it look bent? What's that really looking like? If I'm seeing a lot of dust, if I'm seeing a lot of like gear particle, if that's looking like really, really worn down, That's telling me that something's going on with my hot end, something's going on with my extruder. It's causing like a backup, and it's destroying those gears. So what happens is if those gears get messed up, as you see, there's a tight snug for my filament. My filament's black, so it might be hard to see. But the more wear and tear that you get on those gears, the harder it's going to be for that gear to actually push the filament through, which is then going to cause an issue for your print. Now, the reason why I say this is very important opposed to knowing a bunch of settings is because if I have all of my settings perfectly set and cure, but my extruder's bad, what do those settings really help with? It doesn't help with anything. Then from there, from not knowing this information, you might try to find some information or figure out what's going on, and then you're tweaking, changing all these settings, and still nothing's going right, and you're ending up throwing your 3D printer out the window. Trust me, these three things, if you check these three first, I guarantee you'll find the issue of what's going on with your print. Second thing that I want to look out for with my extruder, some of you guys may have been 3D printing and you're starting to hear like a click, like a, and you're wondering what the heck is that? If you actually look why that's going on and you look at those gears as they're going, so on the print that I'm going on now, if there was a clog going on by the extruder, those gears, you see how they're moving like that? They want to be able to flow that easily, because of course there's a clog in there. So again, this doesn't have a brain, it can't sense that. So it's going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And that's what's going to hear that, that's what's going to be causing that knocking noise that's going on. How would I fix that issue? It's pretty simple. You just have to remove a couple of pieces, which I'll get into next when I'm going over the hot end, and find out where the clog is, remove the clog, clean the clog, get right back to printing. Now there are fixes and edits and changes that you can do for this hot end. With a lot of creality, a lot of enders, though, that's probably the first thing that's gonna start to go on you, is your Bowden tube, and your extruder. Those are two things that just with these models, it just happens. There are fixes to this that you can do to prevent that from happening in total. So there are metal extruders. So the extruder is just pretty much everything that you see on top here, and then like I said, in that box there are gears inside of there. So they do have a metal extruder kit that you can purchase on Amazon. If you have a local Micro Center usually has packs. They're usually like, it's called like a Swiss something. They're usually red. The 3D printer comes with tools. Again, in my next section, I'll get into those tools. But with those tools, you'll be able to take everything apart and put that new metal extruder in. Even with the metal extruder, nothing's 100% like impervious. There may still be wear and tear, but this is something that you can use to get a lot more usage, so that way you're not changing this thing out every week or every month or anything like that, depending on how often you're printing. Again, with that option, you can buy the same extruder again as well, if that's something that you want to do. If it's a little cheaper than the metal extruder. So there are those two fixes that you can do. So in summary, part one is your extruder. Now again, your extruder feeds filament into your hot end. That's its main focus. It has no brain to tell it, hey, there's a clog, stop. It doesn't know that. It's just going to keep going. Again, the main things that you want to do is look at those gears and look at the condition that those gears are in. If that's looking bad, you don't need any videos. You can look at those physically and say, hey, I noticed there's something wrong. And then two, if you hear clicking, then it probably means that you have a jam. Check to see if you have a jam, or check your hot end to see if it's too close to the bed, because that can happen too, where your nozzle's not getting enough space, the filament's getting stuck, and it's causing that jam as well there. And again, third, you can also change these out for a metal extruder, so that way get a little bit more usage out of it, a lot longer life out of it, and you don't have to worry about this as much. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to be focusing on is going to be the hot end. So now, what is the purpose? What is this hot end here for? Well, like I mentioned, you have your extruder, which is feeding in the plastic that's going to be printing into this hot end. What the hot end then there does is melts that plastic along a pattern to actually create the product that you're printing. What are some things that can go wrong with the hot end? Boy, where do I begin? Like I mentioned, you do get a bag with tools that comes with your printer, or that should come with your printer. These tools you should be very, very comfortable with. You should take everything out of the bag. You should find out what every tool does. You should find out, because it comes with different Allen keys, you should find out which tool or which Allen key goes with which nut, what takes out what adjusts what. You should get very, very, very comfortable with those tools, because those tools are going to be used a lot, or should be used a lot. A lot of time where I'm 3D printing now, I've had these printers for almost 2 years now. So sometimes I have to do some maintenance. Sometimes I have to pop stuff open because things are getting a little older. As you can see, there's dust, so on and so forth. So I would highly recommend to get very comfortable with those tools, because the longer you print, the more you're going to be busting that bag open. As you see, there are little wrenches that come with it. The whole nine. You get a full kit. The hot end, you can actually see the temperature right here. And what that does is it pretty much is a regulation of what temperature do I have to be to melt this plastic. Now, if you're not aware of what temperature you should be printing on, most of your filaments are going to come with a temperature that give you a rough estimate, so try to stay within those ranges. I found for mine, I use Inland PLA Plus, so at 200 degrees, works beautifully. But there are filaments that are a little bit different. I have PLA Plus, but I have transparent PLA Plus. And that, I've noticed the temperature I have to differentiate, because there's a little bit different, I would say, material that goes into making something transparent, opposed to something that makes something like a solid color. So there's a little difference. What else does your hot end do? Your hot end also has that fan. That fan keeps the hot end at the temperature that you set it to, and you have what's called a thermistor in here as well. Pretty much the same thing as your thermostat in your house. What it does is keeps and tracks the regulation of the heat that the hot end is at, and makes sure that that stays regulated. I have had issues with my hot end before when my thermistor has gone bad. Everything that you see on these printers is replaceable, either through, if you have a Micro Center or Amazon, or even the manufacturer. But again, it all comes down to you being able to be handy with those tools and know exactly what you're opening up and what you're doing with what. The main thing that you want to focus on with this hot end are two things. One, your Bowden tube. As I mentioned before, this is a stock part, just like the extruder. These Bowden tubes do get wear and tear. I mean, you're talking about 200 degrees that plastic is making direct contact to this red hot end here. So as you can imagine, 200 degrees to metal isn't going to do the same thing that it's going to do to the plastic that it's actually casing. So using your wrenches, opening this up often, opening up your hot end often, is something that you'll have to do quite often, especially if you have these Bowden tubes, because they do melt under that heat, which then inside of your hot end is causing a backup. So that's one thing that you want to keep an eye on. Now, of course, just like everything, you can upgrade these as well. There's what's called a Capricorn tube. It's pretty much the same thing as this Bowden tube, but it's blue. You can't see through it, and it's a lot thicker material that can endure that heat that's going on through it. Now again, it's still a plastic, So after time, it still will wear, but just the same thing as a metal extruder, you can get more usage out of it. There are different types of hot ends that you can grab as well, depending on what kind of filament you're using, but I don't want to scare you guys and get all into that. The main thing that you want to focus on, one, is your Bowden tube and its connection to the hot end. So if I was to undo this screw, take everything out and look inside of there, there could either A, be a good connection, or B, some of that plastic could be melted and I have to cut the Bowden tube from where the melted plastic is and pretty much resurface it so that way there's a nice flush touch to it. Second is the hot end nozzle. Right under there, hiding that little gold piece. That's the second thing that you want to really focus on with this hot end, because the same thing, those metal pieces are going under 200 degrees each time that you print. So there could be warping that goes on with those, or on the inside, I had a pair of two that I just changed from these, but when I opened it up, basically they were burnt. The tip of the hot end was like smushed in. It was like opening up a little. It looked terrible from the back end. Some of the old plastic was still stuck there as well. So those hot ends you really do want to keep an eye on. The best print that you'll ever get from these is the first print, because those nozzles are going to be so perfect. It's like writing with a new pen. And that's kind of what you want to think of the hot end as. It's like the nozzle is the ballpoint of the pen. So as long as that's level to the paper, which is going to be your bed, as long as there's no defects, no clogs going on in it, that's the main thing that you want to focus on with those two. So again, wrapping up with the hot end, there are two major components that you want to keep an eye on. I should say three. One is the Bowden tube. Two is the inside of the hot end, making sure that there's no plastic or gunk. And then three, the hot end itself, or the nozzle. Again, if I can see that my extruder is good, my hot end is good, then I know I'm on my way to a good print. As far as maintenance, again, you can go to Micro Center, Amazon, or anything else like that. And basically they give you like a little kit. There's more to this kit. You can see there all the pieces that come with it, and this pretty much is going to be everything to take care of your hot end. So you're going to get these little, I don't know what these are called, but these little metal wires or barbs. These pretty much go into the hot end, and that's what you can use to clean everything out with. So definitely look into little kits like these. Look into more kits that have to do with like the little wrenches and everything that you get. Again, the more familiar and the better you get with these tools, the better you're going to see in the long run of your printing. And finally, the bed of your 3D printer. Now there's a lot to, not really a lot to that goes into these, but there are things that you really want to focus on. Starting from the bottom up, just like I mentioned before, those springs. So as you can see under my CR10S, sometimes you really do get lucky. I know with the CR10Ss, sometimes you might not get those orange springs. Sometimes they give you a Capricorn tube. So sometimes they give you something a little different. But what those orange springs do is they're a lot thicker or a lot tougher than original springs that they would put on these printers. So once I level my bed with these springs, as you can see, the print bed as you're printing is moving, shaking, vibrating. Those orange clips there are pretty much reinforcing it so that way it's harder for those to move. So just like everything, nothing's going to be 100% stable, but you can actually do something so that way you get more usage without having to reset. So basically all those do is make it so that when I print and when I level and I start to print, I can print for a lot longer before having to re-level because it's locked in. Second thing you want to look at is the actual print surface itself. As you see here, I have a glass bed now. When I first started 3D printing, I actually had a magnetic bed. Um, Boy, do I miss that thing on the Ender 3 Pro. That if you have an Ender 3 Pro and you have that magnetic bed, let me tell you something. You have one of the best beds in 3D printing, because that thing was a beaut. You can print something, it's stuck nicely, and then after you can remove that pad and then pop your print right off of it. So when I moved to this glass bed, it was a lot different. Now, a lot of people see my videos, so on and so forth, and they ask, well, why do you have tape on there? The tape is just another measure of precaution, just the same way the wrap that the tape is on there as well. Pretty much what it does is it's just like an extra adhesive. So with these glass beds, it's a little bit harder to get something to actually stick. So when I first got this, there were different things that I seen people making YouTubes on how to actually get this to work a little bit better. Because again, that magnetic bed was so good. So some people I seen use hairspray. They would apply a coat of hairspray onto their bed, get it a little sticky, and I guess that worked for them. Me myself, I would caution people when using that method. One, because these beds do heat up. There's like a little thermal pad under this bed if you were to ever look at it, which is also replaceable. But hairspray is flammable. The hot end is about 200 degrees, as I mentioned as well. It's causing friction by moving around the print bed. So if you're gonna go with that method, I would say highly be cautious. Make sure that your printer is somewhere that even if it does or were to catch fire, that you'd be able to take care of it, you'd be aware. I would say if you're doing that method, never ever leave your printer running and you're not at home, because that sounds very dangerous. Two, some people use Elmer's glue. So they'll get like the little glue stick that we used to use in pre-K and everything like that, and they'll put a thin layer of that on their print bed and then start printing from there. I actually seen some people use painter's tape and basically put that painter's tape and completely cover the bed, kind of like a two-sided tape kind of method, so that way the filament sticks on there as well. Now, one thing that I do want to tell you with doing all three of those methods is, of course, that you're adding an extra layer to this glass bed. A very thin layer, but that actually matters when you're going to level your bed, because if this is about a 0.8 millimeter, just throwing out random numbers, and you just added like 0.2 millimeters thick painter's tape, you're gonna have to re-level, because that 0.2 millimeters now just brought your bed 0.2 millimeters closer to the hot end. So of course you're gonna have to re-level and then go from there. So again, keep that in mind if you were to use any of those methods, that you do have to adjust your printer from there. Next is really important, but I would say it's very important, but don't pull your hair out because of it, is getting the bed actually level. Now, there are different ways that you can actually do this. What I want to tell you first is that these printers, just like everything else, nothing is perfect. So don't pull your hair out, because I know I used to. When I first started printing and I first started to try to level, I would rip my hair out trying to make sure that this thing was absolutely perfect. But for reasons other than myself and other because the world is not God, nothing's perfect. So these print beds actually come out warped sometime as well. Nothing's gonna be perfectly level, nothing's gonna be perfectly even. What you wanna do is get it as good as you can, so that way you get something like this. Now, there are ways to know that that's gonna happen early in the print. When the print first starts, you'll always notice that your 3D printer prints like a little one solid line and then gets onto the file. If you're paying attention to that line and it's not coming out solid, if it's looking like gappy or like too stuck close, know that there's something wrong with your level. Now, for me on the CR10S, again, everything's a little different. Some printers do come with auto leveling, some people do use BL Touch. To each his own. But what I do essentially is all the screw points that you can see on the bed, that's where I'll get this hot end to and then level. And how I do that's pretty much all measurements of 30. So to get to this first screw here, 30 on the X, 30 on the Y. To get to this screw here, still keep it at 30. I think it's the Y where I go over to 260. So then it's 30, 260 there. And then same thing, still keep this at 260, go blah, 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 blah. Basically what I'm doing is getting over those 4 screw points and checking for a level from there. Now this is important because when you're leveling, you want to make sure that you're going back to the same exact spot. So I wouldn't want to level on that screw, on all 4 screws, and then come back and then start leveling over here, and then when I get to this side, start leveling there. That's what I mean by you'll be pulling your hair. Find 4 spots on the printer. You might not have or be able to see these screws, but find 4 spots on your printer where you feel comfortable. There are different YouTube videos that pretty much show you per printer where you should be leveling, and there are some STL files that'll help you level as well. But for me, again, I use these screws and go over those and make sure that I have a good tension. Now, how do you get the tension? This is very important. There are different things that you can use. I've heard people use sticky notes, regular notebook paper, so on and so forth. The main thing of what you're using to level your bed that you want to focus on is the thickness of it. You want to keep a consistency with that as well. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if I measure this screw with a sticky note, I'm not going to use a scrap piece of notebook paper to measure this one. And then to the one in the back, I'm not going to get a piece of receipt paper. And no, because again, the same way as when you're adding the duct tape or the painter's tape or the glue to this, everything has a different thickness. The thickness you might not be able to see with your eye, but there is something different. So if I'm leveling one time and I'm using a sticky note, every single time that I level my printer, I'm always going to use a sticky note. Now it's not going to be the same one. I'm not telling you to wear down that same sticky note, but stay consistent, because if I measure or level out one time with the sticky note and it's good, and then the next time I level out and I use a regular piece of paper and now I'm too close to the print bed, well, obviously the difference is because I use something completely different. So whatever you use the first time, stick to that. When I'm going over each of these screws, the main thing that I'm looking for is the tightness in the paper. If the paper is able to move freely under the nozzle, or if it's too tight, then I know that I'm off with leveling. You'll get the feeling like 100%. The best thing that anybody told me was that it should feel like sandpaper. And when you start leveling, you'll know. When you're pushing that paper under there, you'll be like, that's way too tight, nothing's moving, nothing's going, like something doesn't feel right. But when you get that sweet spot and you feel the sandpaper, like you're 100% know. That's all I pretty much have to say is it'll feel like sandpaper. The paper won't move too freely and it won't be too stiff. It'll be just like porridge, just right. But that's the main things that you want to focus on with the print bed. One, always understand going into this that the print bed has a warp, so you're not going to get it 100% perfect. Don't pull your hair out. Find 4 points to measure. Stay consistent with what you're using when you're leveling, and look into some upgrades if you can as well. So again, I hope that helped you guys a little bit more on steps and processes that you should take and what you should look at to actually get something that looks just like this. Again, don't worry about anything on the computer. Don't worry about your settings. Worry first about understanding how the printer works. Get very comfortable with those tools and start to get a process of when you want to start printing. Because to be honest, if some of you guys just started and were trying to go at a file like this and your printer was going, I guarantee you wouldn't sleep through the night, because every 5 seconds you'll be getting up, oh, is something going on with it? Oh, is something going on with it? Oh, is something going on with it? The more you know that printer, the better and comfortable you are with that printer. I promise you, you'll be able to sleep at night, because I know at times there were times where I couldn't sleep at night because I was nervous about what my printer was doing. So again, throw the computer to the side, get used to that printer, get very, very comfortable with using those tools, because before doing a print like this, it took me a little bit of time to actually tackle it. Want to know why? Because I knew that there was something that I had to do with my printer before getting into that. I knew that there was a little clog going on in my printer, so before doing that, I knew I had to get those tools out, open everything up, find out where the clog was, put everything back, and then go at it. So sometimes that might be going on with you guys as well, where you're getting a little overwhelmed. You're trying to print. Get a schedule. For me, I work, so on the weekends is when I'll start to print. Starting on Friday. If I print something on Friday, I try not to go over print for 2 days, because if I start Friday, if something fails on Saturday, well, I can still stop that print, see what was going on, and then judge if I want to continue from there. So definitely having a schedule will help you guys out a lot more, because it kind of gives you a mind or a focus. Hey, this time is strictly for 3D printing, so whatever I have to go through for it, I'm gonna go through it right now. I definitely hope that video helped you guys out. If it did, definitely hit the like button, hit the share button. It's New Year, Christmas, New Year's, new birthdays. A lot of people are getting new 3D printers, so a lot of people might be going through this as well. So hitting that share button would definitely help not only yourself, but the next person. And then subscribe. That part's just for me. No, I'm just kidding. Looking to grow my community, grow with you guys as well. So you subscribing, joining my channel, not only do I show you everything that I make, but I'll be making a lot more of these videos as well to help you guys out as well. So joining the community actually helps our communication, so that way I can see exactly what you're looking for, what's going on, and then I can create a video from there to help you guys out. Besides that, guys, make sure you're getting your sleep. I know you're standing in front of your printers just like this, watching the amazement. Enjoy, guys. It's a new year. It's a new thing that you're trying. This does take time. There is a learning curve, but the more that you put into it, the more you have a structured schedule, and the more you're just breathing and just not letting it overwhelm you with settings, the more fun you'll have. I still stand in front of my printer for minutes looking at what's coming out, especially for a print like this, so it's not weird, it is normal. But Happy New Year's, guys. Enjoy those 3D printers. Leave a comment below what kind of printer you have, what you might be going through. It's BZ Comics. Enjoy.